Thank you, Council. It's 8:55. We will resume this public hearing. I'll just give the people a minute to get back in their seats. Okay, I think we're ready to start. I will ask if there's anyone that'd like to come forward and speak. Please come forward now.
Hello, Mayor and Councillors. I'm Teresa Wigglesworth, and I'm at 4731 73rd Ave Northeast. I would like to rebut what Mr. Aerosmith just said. I happen to be one of those property owners against the border of this property, and I am very much so against this. He did come to my home on Thursday evening to persuade me that this was in my best interest. I have sent a letter to council as of this morning in regards to that conversation, and at no time did I lead him to believe that this is something we were for. I felt during our conversation with him slightly bullied, as his view was there's so much worse options out there than the mobile home park, which I completely disagree with. I would like to see the condo buildings, the R4 zoning, as well as he let me know in that R4 zoning, we can have small lots with small homes on them, which once again, I am for. That would definitely benefit our community. In this proposal for the mobile home park, they have requested smaller lots. The lot sizes they're requesting in this R6 are exactly the same sizes that are currently in R4. The only difference is they're not planning to sell the land. They're planning to make money off the land monthly, which I completely disagree with. One of my biggest concerns about this is the fear that this is going to get changed to an R6 property and the purchaser will not carry through with making this a mobile home park. My fear is that if the variances are not waived, going forward, this will still sit on the market for the next 10 years, but now attract potential purchasers for a mobile home park, not medium density, which the community of Canoe desperately needs. At this time, there is no condo buildings. There are no townhouses. My aging parents who want to stay in the community of Canoe do not have another option which would not have a yard space for them to live in. I do feel that's the right thing, and I do feel that we need to wait until the right developer comes.
Thank you, Ms. Wigglesworth. Is there any questions for this presenter? Thank you for coming forward. Any other presenters? Please come forward. Mr. Aerosmith, we'll just let everyone have one turn first. Okay. Sorry, there's some people who haven't spoke yet that want to turn. We will give second options after everyone's had an opportunity.
Mayor and Council, Steve Fabro, 801 8th Avenue Northeast. My daughter Marley was one of the people in the presentation there, and we'd love her to move out. As much as we love her. And Canoe's a beautiful part of town. She spends a lot of time there with her friends. The reality of the situation is, for a 22-year-old person, she can't even afford a lot. We've had a lot of conversation about budgeting and what she's going to do when she does move out. Given the budgetary constraints she faces, something under the $1,500 a month mark is where she's at. We had a lengthy conversation about where she wants to live, what she wants to live in. This development meets the needs that she has. One of her greatest concerns was not owning the land. And I had a conversation with her, and I outlined it in a letter I did send to council, and pad rental versus fee simple ownership. And pad rental, really, it's not profit for the park owner. It's akin to a strata fee in a strata complex. It covers taxes, sewer, water, snow removal, insurance, park management, hydro to the lights in the park, and of course servicing the debt on the purchase and development costs of the park land. You know, they have to set aside money similar to a contingency fund in a strata. So for her to experience, you know, the pride and joy of home ownership in a place where she can garden, she can, you know, walk to the beach, enjoy all the amenities Canoe has to offer, and in terms of affordable housing, I don't see how anything could be more affordable than what's being offered here. Thanks for your time this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Fabro. Any questions for Mr. Fabro? Thank you very much for your presentation. Is there other presenters who have not had an opportunity would like an opportunity to speak?
Yes, Herb Feeper, 2190 28th Street, Northeast. I've worked for Terry and Kerry for about 10 years, doing their setups and parks. Excuse me, the last park he did, I did every one of them. And they do a nice job. They get a nice product, they give their customers what they want, and it looks good. They don't do a cheap park. I would rather see a park down there than 3-story condos, and ask your neighbors behind how they're going to like that one. When you get a full row of condos are high density too. They're not cheap. People can lock their own head south if they want to go. They can rent them. They can do whatever. You know, Terry's not, in my opinion, does a very nice job on a product that is come a long way. They're very compatible to a house. You know, ask all the people up in this last park what they think of it. I think you'll find about 90% or 95% love them. You're gonna get 1% that are gonna say something's, haywire or whatever, but you're gonna get that on a house. You're gonna get that anywhere. All in all, he's improving the street signs or the streets, the sidewalks. I've had people say they're scared to walk down Canoe Drive. It's too dark. It's scary. Well, put some houses in there. Put some lights in, some sidewalks. I don't see other people lined up to do it. That's about all I got to say. It's just he does a nice job and he does what he's going to say.
Thank you, Mr. Pieper. Is there any questions from council? Seeing none, thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak who has not had an opportunity? Please come forward.
Good evening. My name is Lawrence Roy, 1630 60th Ave in Salmon Arm. I've just been sitting back and listening to a lot of the points of view that have been made tonight, and they've been made very respectfully, but there's an undercurrent that's, I feel, slightly demeaning to the people who would actually be purchasing these homes. We're trying to make financial and lifestyle decisions for people who are perfectly capable of making those decisions on their own. Yeah. The comments have been made that we can afford to wait. We is a great term as long as it's not my dollars. We can afford to wait. It's not our property. It is an owner's property. We have a developer who's stepped up, is willing to take the risk to the tune of nearly $3 million. That $3 million is payable on day one. I don't know that many of us would be willing to step up and take that risk. Condos are in development all over Salmon Arm. We saw this at the very start of the presentations this evening. I don't think we can look at any individual project as being the start and end of affordable housing or a solution to the housing crisis in Salmon Arm. I think fixing our housing crisis is going to require a paintbrush that covers the entire community, and we need to look at all the housing options that are being presented in their entirety. We can't cherry pick which ones we want to go there. We need to let the market decide that. The comments about wanting more green space, these lot sizes are too small. I find these very contradictory statements. If we want 50, 100, 140 condos built here, the green space will evaporate. It's unfortunate, but as density increases, green space has to decrease. Comments made about vacationers only using these homes for a limited time each year really, I believe, are unfair statements. It's not up to us to decide how people, proper rightful landowners, use their homes, how many days they sleep in the beds in those homes. Salmon Arm's a big retirement community. Snowbirders and snowboarders are a big part of our community as well. It's not up to us to decide how people use their homes. And regardless of how they use them, these people pay their taxes year-round. Groups are attempting to make decisions about financing and affordability that should only be made by the homeowner. I would support council in approving the rezoning and letting homeowners make the decisions as to whether this is affordable and appropriate for them and their personal situation. The Tarnos are willing to take the risk. I don't know that any of us would be. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roy. Any questions for Mr. Roy? Thank you very much. Any other speakers who haven't had a turn yet? Good evening.
Good evening. Thomas Knotts, 72nd Avenue Northeast down in Canoe. I'd just like to reiterate a couple points here that people keep going back and forth on how a high density housing or medium density, what it's zoned for now, lacks green space when you have, say, 140 units. My previous residence down on the coast before I moved up here was we owned a condo in Surrey, and it was 2 buildings, and I believe the total count was approximately 100 units on about an acre of land. That included a large sum of green space. There was tons of green space out front of the unit and a huge play area in behind it, as well as ample amounts of parking. So saying that moving, going to the R6 zoning is going to add more green space, I don't believe it is. Even if you go like 2 stories high in that size of area, you could have ample amount of green spaces on the roof, all that sort of things. The way it sits now, you're limited to your lot size and you're limited to what the landowner states that you can put in that area if you want. If you want to build a gazebo because you want to have a nice gazebo, well, if the landowner says you cannot put that in there, it's not part of the plan, not part of the park, not part of whatever, you are held against that. You can't do it. When I came up here, I looked at a bunch of houses before I brought my wife up here to live with us. And one of the things I found funny was I could not afford a mobile home. The cost of the home plus the cost of pad rental made it uneconomical for my financial position at the time. What I ended up doing was actually buying an actual house where I actually owned the land. Now, when I was doing a lot of investigation, a lot of comparing of pricing, what's good, what's not good, I found that, yes, right now maybe the housing has gone up. I will not deny that. My value of my property has gone up significantly since I purchased it, but it's still not out of the reach of someone like some of the prices that have been thrown around, $1,200, $1,500, $2,000. A $1,500 for a house, to actually own your house, actually own your land, for something that is going to go up significantly over and over, year after year, is going to be more beneficial to the people that purchase it. They're going to have that pride of ownership. Whereas someone that still owns their land can come up with maybe a better option in 20 years, kick everyone out, and all those people are looking for that, where they turn around and sell it to someone that wants to put in a couple multi-million-dollar mansions on the land because of how close it is to the lake, how big Salmon Arm's becoming, how popular and desirable it is. I have friends that come up from the coast. I have people that see where I live, and they would love to come up here. Now, that being said, they don't want to be living in a park or an area where they don't own their land. I have nothing against the mobile home, the trailer park, whatever you would like to call it at this point, if the people that purchase the land or purchase these houses actually own the land that they live on. That way no one can kick them out. People can't take it away from them. Right now it's that someone can actually come in and take their land away from them. Right now I live in a house where I can do whatever I want to my house as long as it falls into what you guys say I'm allowed to do, of course. But I can still do it within reason. There it's, yeah, I can paint the interior of my house, but hey, 10 years down the road, I don't like the exterior color. I can rechange mine, but the person living in a park like that's being proposed will not be able to do that unless it's approved by the landowner, council, whatever they have set up to handle variances in that aspect of it. So I feel that the best option here, you go with the condo, go with the medium density, and you can have your, $400,000 or $500,000, option, but you can also have your $200,000 option. I mean, one of the presenters earlier mentioned the condo spaces going from 160 to 250,000, where they actually own part of the land. And that falls in within the reasonable aspect of what has been presented for the development of affordable. So the affordable is there without rezoning. So,
Thank you very much.
sorry, I'm not good at public speaking. I do apologize.
Yeah, you've done just fine. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Not at this moment.
Great, thank you very much. Any questions, council? Okay, thank you for coming forward. Any other speakers who have not had a chance yet?
Mr. Mayor, councillors, Chuck Crosby, 7850 50th Ave Southwest. And I would just like to say that I personally am in favor of the rezoning application. I guess as much as for any reason as the fact that I've resided in Salmon Arm since the mid-70s, and that particular piece of property, as everybody knows, has just sat there and it's just been a field. And as a former realtor, I also am aware that there were a number of proposals put forward for multifamily housing, and they just didn't fly because they were not economically viable. Once again, everybody's aware of the issue that we've got as far as affordable housing. In my humble opinion, we have an opportunity of at least partially addressing that shortage of housing and affordable housing right now. So, as I say, in my humble opinion, I would like to see it move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Crosby. Any questions for Mr. Crosby? Okay, seeing none. Any other speakers who haven't had a chance to speak?
Good evening, Council. Mayor Harrison. My name's Richard Smith. I reside at 1281 70th Avenue Northeast. I've attended school in Canoe, and I've lived in Canoe since 1973. I'm speaking on behalf of the current landowners. I don't know the numbered companies memorized, but the owners are Neil Van Vliet and Jeff Arnold. Their two companies are the companies that own that land. Those landowners have gone bankrupt, and one of them has had to go to personal bankruptcy. Tecumar Mortgage Fund Limited has been handed the keys. Tecumar Mortgage Fund Limited is not myself, nor is it Tecumar Mortgages. That company, Tecumar Mortgages, arranges mortgages for many of the homes in the most recent subdivision in Canoe. We don't lend money but represent buyers to make sure they get a fair rate. We have in the past also arranged many of the mortgages in the area known as Lakeside Pines, directly south of this subdivision. I've run Tecumar Mortgages since 1995. It's existed since 1973. Tecumar Mortgage Fund Limited is a different company. It's a group of local investors that invest in a mutual fund of mortgages. This company has financed various developments over the last 25 years, including many local subdivisions, including some that are underway currently. This company does this as an alternative to banks, much like a credit union on a smaller scale, with profits, and in this case, on this land, large losses going back to the investor. I represent the management of those investors. This piece of land is a losing investment for that group and has been for the last 6 years. There have been many letters for and against the proposed zoning. I'd like to clarify many facts that are unclear due to misinformation of facts or people just stating things because they have possibly investigated them and not found what we find as the true facts that we think are true. Current city requirements for off-site land dedications and development cost charges on this land are over $1.6 million. That's more than 172% of the actual selling price that it's been proposed to sell for. That is the main reason this land is sat vacant. For the last 12 years that I've been tied to it, And I don't know if the 40 years before it's history at that time. It's been unused for over 50 years. When I moved here in 1970, it was a vacant packing house. I've never seen it actually never saw it actually have a function. Land was marketed extensively as R4 in 2010 to 2012. One of our previous speakers criticized that the marketing wasn't done properly. It was marketed heavily. The reason it was not seen too much in this town is because it was very much marketed to snowbirds and retirees from out of this province. The current owners built a show unit and which showed features of the interiors on Hudson Street. They rented a space there and mocked up what a unit would look like. Spent over $250,000 in marketing and attempted to pre-sale enough units to start the development. 140 units, which I don't think were ever proposed by Jeff and Neil. I think it was 150 per side. Times the current value of at least $240,000 just to build, not to sell, constitutes an investment of over $33 million. Lenders require pre-sales over 50% for any stage. These pre-sales were unable to be obtained. Significant effort and expense was done and R4 failed. So there's a lot of people saying it's a great thing. They're not saying it with their money, but they're saying it's got to be R4, it's got to be R4. There's only ever been one proposal for this land as R4, and that was the previous one. Before then, it was an R1 piece of property. This property has been listed with top commercial real estate firms for over 6 years with no offers that have not failed. Elf Sanderson and Tim Downs of NAI Real Estate stated that due to demands of the city for off-site costs in excess of $950,000, road dedication, and location next to a CP rail main line, no offers have completed past the inquiry stage. There's another $500,000 to $600,000 of DCC charges being requested too. I've personally approached 5 local developers, including Cliff Davies of Purple Strings, Gary Arsenal, Jim Grieve, Dave Barnard, and also Bill Laird due to his involvement with a local city advisory committee for affordable multifamily housing project. All our developers are successful in their own right and have not had any interest for exactly the same reasons that Elf Sanderson has stated. There's been some opposition throwing numbers around how pad rent is equal to interest on a mortgage, but that is simply not true. To build an R1 lot on the current land, which many see as a reasonable alternative, put the cost unattainable for many and the land undevelopable. The lot's due to city offsite costs, and it's not a fault I'm blaming on the city. These are the rules of what, because it's got 330 meters of frontage, are required. It's not a fair allocation of offsite costs because that's an arterial road. Arterial roads are supposed to be paid for by DCCs, not the actual developer by himself. Because if it was shaped at 90 degrees to what it was, the offsite cost would be approximately a third, and it likely would have sold. That is every time a developer goes and asks the city officials what it's going to cost, they get quoted what improvements need to be made on Canoe Beach Drive, land dedication, DCCs, and off-site costs, and they walk away. They just go, there's just nothing left in it. One of the developers came to us and including off-site costs at the land selling currently at under BC assessment would end up being at least $138,000 including GST for each lot. This number is directly from a local developer who has built several subdivisions. His comment that at that price there's no incentive to develop as there's no market for the lots that expensive. They cannot have a basement because of groundwater and there is no view. The lots in the recent Canoe subdivision development only sold for $100,000 to $140,000 with a view, and now homes are $500,000 to $600,000. That's certainly not affordable housing. I've got a son. He's freshly out of university, got 4 job offers right away. He makes $60,000 a year. He can't qualify for a home in this town. Interest at only 3.69% on 138,000 is $426 a month. Adding to that, sewer and water, taxes, snow plowing would add another 153. So on a single family R1 lot, your cost without servicing any debt, you'd never own it, you'd be a renter forever, but you're not renting to Mr. Tarnall, you're renting from a bank because you're paying interest. There's no difference. Renting from a bank and borrowing money if you're not paying down any principal. So that calculation with no principal is $579 a month. $154 more per month for the same amount of land Mr. Tarnall plans to market the pads for at $425 a month in his current application as it stands. After that, the government very strongly regulates pad rent to inflation increases. This year that number was 2%. So there's the insinuation that people are going to develop this, and then they're going to use the land, the house owners for several years, and then kick them all out and use it for a high-rise or a couple $2 million, $4 million homes. Very strong laws in this province to stop that, to move people out of a modular home community. You have to provide them with, in the same community, another place to put their home. With the difficulty of this present application, I don't see somebody being able to find another 60 spots somewhere else. On top of that, you have to pay for moving their homes, and you just can't come along and say, oh, I get to develop it for something else now and you guys all move. One of our councillors at one of these meetings stated that her basement gets 50 calls when she puts up an ad for a rental. Where are the other 49 going to live? There's a vocal group of Not My Backyard that oppose a solution for this land that will provide for those that cannot find a rental for under $1,500 or afford a $461,000 home, the average price in this town for a home. People are comparing today's modern, high-quality manufactured home with homes from 50 years ago. The homes built today are built to the same standard as conventional homes. People have been told that several times tonight.
Mr. Smith, could I ask you to summarize now?
No. There's been people talk longer than me, Alan. I don't think I'm repeating anything. If I am, let me know and I'll stop.
Okay, I will.
But
Continue.
I've had this problem's been in my back for 12 years. I think
Fair enough, continue.
10 minutes or 15.
Speak directly to me. You're doing fine.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry for the interruption.
Apologies accepted. The owners of manufactured homes on a rented pad will have no fear of it selling from under them. Growing up in Canoe, that was a big concern for a lot of kids. They were in a rented house and they never knew when it was going to sell. That's still a concern for anybody that does rent in this town. Gets sold, they get 3 months notice and they're out, and then they come to Tecumar Mortgages and go, where am I going to live now? And we don't have an answer for them sometimes. And it's not our job to find those homes, but it's to help them finance it. They will not have to share the walls with neighbors as they would in an R4. Each will have a yard and a personal space in a home, for a home, and 2 parking places. This is only a proposal for 60 homes, while the city's comments in the recommendations by staff state if it was R1 it would allow 68 homes. So stating they're getting crowded in is doesn't seem to back what it would be allowed if it was an R1. I personally myself attended the homes directly to the south of proposed development land on 73rd Avenue on February 26th and 27th. I was very much surprised with their reaction. Out of 14 homes right against the development, I personally did not have one person tell me they were opposed to R6 zoning. Ms. Wigglesworth is, and incorrectly stated, is not directly south. She is directly bordering, and she's east. I didn't get to that house. It was minus 16 that night, and I had only had 2 nights to be able to do it. Out of the 14 homes right against the development, I personally did not have one person tell me they were opposed to R6 zoning. If anybody's here that is in there tonight, there was 3 homes that we never got an answer on out of the 14. I do have 14 signatures on separate pages, not an easy petition to sign where people aren't always fully informed of all the intricacies when they sign a petition. On that side of the street stating they approve it as if they feel the recent development above them, they are living in a fishbowl with the new homes looking down on them. They felt with R4 allowing 3 stories, they'd again be looked in from the other side and will lose all their privacy in their yards. Also knocked on many of the other doors on the other side of 73rd Northeast with again friendly pro R6 modular home park zoning. For the above reasons and also for the safety of 45th, being an exit for over 100 homes in case of a forest fire or emergency or any other roadblock it's the other way. They appreciate the quick route to the ballparks and the beach that would be provided for them. Other reasons included 60 new more affordable homes would bring children that would keep their local school open. These are the most affected people in Canoe. They lived on a dead-end road that will be opened up and busier, and they're still for it. They're directly beside a modular home park development. You've been provided in your package signed individual letters of each of those. I'm just about done, you guys. And I'm sorry, it's a long night. This project has the endorsement of city staff. Several meetings with city staff have come up with this plan in conjunction with the Tarnos. The city staff have been told multiple times that the offsites make this land undevelopable. It would be fair if the development called for 45th to be built. To place a major upgrade for an arterial road on the basis of one development when DCCs have been paid for many other lots in Canoe seems unreasonable. If you compare this to other local developments where very little offsite costs had to be done for subdivision, in some cases huge offsite costs were waived completely. This proposal included the DCC is paying for the offsites of an arterial road and the DCC provide enough for actually, now that the Tarnos have changed their mind, any variances being requested don't have to be used out of the DCCs. They're going to pay for them too. ALPA pays for sidewalks both on Canoe Beach Drive and 45th. It mainly provides affordable housing for 60 families who desperately need a place to call home. The city has yet to provide an alternative for affordable housing. One alternative is to make many of the illegal suites in town legal. This still serves to keep people in a wholly rented position with no government control of rents. There is government control of rents while they live there. There isn't government control as soon as they move out and the next ones move in. You can put it to whatever number you want at that time. You can't do that with the modular home park. The rents are stated by the government of what you can raise them by each year, and it's a percentage. This still serves to keep, The land development cost for any single family housing puts people without an income far above the local average of $61,000 out of reach for being anything but renters or apartment dwellers. The so-called lower price homes being developed in the cities now still need a household income far in excess of the local average income. The lower income homes being proposed right now require an household income of $90,000 or 50% more than the local household average income. Local employers need employees, but there's nowhere for them to live. Living in Sycamoose and Blind Bay is one current solution, but you have no people using local facilities. You have people using local facilities and paying nothing in taxes. They also spend $500 to $1,000 in gas, tires, wear and tear on vehicles. Not really cheaper overall. The entire province campaigned for local governments for support of affordable housing. While this is not the ultimate of having land and home owned, it is halfway there and a start and far better than renting. My first home was in Broadview Villa Mobile Home Park and appreciated 50% in the 2 years I lived there. Went from $20,000 to $30,000. And allowed me to have a down payment. Appreciation does occur. I've only found, I looked today, 7 local homes on MLS in modular home parks in Salmon Arm. I have a list for each of the councillors showing the values anywhere from $72,900 to $119,900. These homes are 25 to 46 years old. So people, contrary to the comments earlier, the new price of those homes with furniture in 1970 would have been 12,000, in 1980 25,000, 1990 40,000. That means, contrary to people saying these homes are depreciating, they really went up anywhere from 8 times at the highest to triple at the lowest. That is appreciation in my books. Manufactured homes are the same as any asset. If you look after them and maintain them, they appreciate. There are 40-year-old stick boat homes or modulars on R1 that have been abused, which will depreciate if not looked after. Proposed modular home community will have rules to not allow rentals of homes, to keep up pride of ownership. Yards will be landscaped prior to sale. Pets will need to be fenced. People can paint them whatever color they like, within reason, I guess. The driveways will be paved. No additions will be built, so the park will continue to look decent. All these rules are in excess of current one zoning designed to keep a residence, and all these rules are in excess of current one zoning. They are designed to keep a residence and a person who would be proud to live in it. There's a few comments that have been made that I'm going to comment on to try to clarify what we think are the facts. One letter stated that if council were to approve in Salmon Arm rather than Canoe a modular home community by the lake, it would not happen. There are 8 modular home communities in Salmon Arm on rental pads, while there are none on the north side of the highway in Canoe. All the ones that are in Canoe that people call derogatorily or call them parks and mobile parks and everything else are on R1 land. People chosen to put a manufactured home on there, and they own them. So Salmon Arm does have a large share of the modular home parks. 3 pictures were submitted in your submissions showing that the developer Lakeland Mobile Home Community not replacing a dilapidated old fence. That fence is not on their land, and the Tarnos had no ability to remove it or trespass on the other's land. Another comment stated that Lakeland Park has sheds with particle siding. All shed units in the Lakeland Park are matching in colors and built nicely. There are many homes in Salmon Arm without matching sheds in color and do have OSB siding. I think that's a fairly petty point. Another person used averages from the province where rents in Vancouver far exceeds Salmon Arm for pads. They extrapolate a minimum cost of $1,550, while the real cost can be as low as $1,107, which is much cheaper than a 2 or 3 bedroom house for rent. Another opposer used exclusively the dilapidated lands that were abandoned, an abandoned mobile home park that has since been redeveloped into Lakeland Mobile Home Park. That old park had homes in it over 60 years old, and the owner let it get into disrepair. Broadview Villa Manufactured Home Park is now over 35 years old, and the homes are well maintained, and one home is currently listed over 8 times its original value. Another opposer is calling the land semi-lakefront. While there is a line of homes with no lake access allowed through them, there's a set of CP Rail mainline, and there's also 2 roads. I don't think it's semi-lakefront. Another letter of opposition, the writers exaggerated homeowner grants to downplay tax revenue. I have a copy of taxes for a current home assessed at $99,300. In 2018, the taxes are $892.65. They had their estimations of tax revenue for the town. In the presentations you've had the taxes down to $350 a month, not $892. I looked up another home online today, and taxes were $993. With taxes that high and higher, the land taxes on the whole property and the projected tax revenue from the homes would be $74,000 to $112,000, and much higher in proportion to stick-built homes in terms of assessment value. So not a higher number, but a higher number in percentage compared to the assessments. Yes, the city can optimize for more taxes by building R4, but does that supply affordable housing or homes that families can live in with a little land for themselves? Please take this time to see if this proposal betters the community as a whole. There are many that talk loud that it has been available for development for years, but nothing's been done. If there's a local desire for the land to be developed for optimizing taxes or a higher end strata that will break the developers, please let me know how to do this. I support the affordable home option for 4,400 and 4,600 Canoe Beach Drive. Thank you for your time, and sorry for going over.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Is there any questions for Mr. Smith? Thank you very much. Is there other speakers who haven't had a turn? Please come forward. Any speakers who have not had a turn yet that would like to speak? Okay, I'll ask for a second time, and if you have spoken and want to add to it, we will not prohibit you from doing that. So anyone that's spoken before and would like to speak again, please come forward.
Tom Aerosmith, 3141 Okanagan Ave, Northeast. I just wanted to take a minute quickly, and I apologize because I'm not going to speak directly to you for a minute.
No, sorry, you have to speak to me.
Okay, I feel terrible for the comments that were made where it was said that I was bullying. I did not get that sense whatsoever. We had a half-hour conversation between myself, the lady that spoke, and her husband, and I thought it was a very great conversation. I did speak when I was up here that we had talked to the 14 properties directly bordering the south of the property. So I did not include her in it because I knew that they were against it. But it was not my intention to have her feel bullied, and I just wanted to say that I apologize greatly for that. And I thought that it was a very constructive conversation, and I wholeheartedly apologize. And I did tell them that that's what I thought was great about this country is we can have people that have two different viewpoints and at the end of the day still get along, have constructive conversations, and have no hard feelings towards each other. So if there are hard feelings, lastly, I do apologize again. One thing I did want to touch on before that I missed the first time was some of the interest rates and limited access to lenders. All of the major 5 banks do lend on mobile homes. The person before was saying that they had contacted mortgage brokers. Part of the reason why I think that statistic was said was that those banks don't work with mortgage brokers, but myself as a mortgage broker have sent a file to those banks and had them funded. We just don't get paid on them. But sometimes we'll do that. I work for free quite often when I do mobile homes because it's more important to get people into those houses than getting paid on a file. There's one lender in town that does increase the interest rate for a mobile home, but all of the other 5 do not. They charge their regular interest rates as if they would to a regular stick-built home. And lastly, what I would say to people is there's been a lot of things said about pride of homeownership. I would challenge everybody on council and anybody in the audience to go speak to any mobile homeowner in a park and ask them if they have pride of home ownership. They're not going to say, I don't own the land below me, I don't care about my home. Anybody that owns a home is grateful, and they're going to be grateful no matter what. And the other thing is that if you go talk to a condo owner, they don't own the land that's below them because below them is a number of more people that are living under them. Their basement floor is someone else's ceiling. There isn't ground beneath them. It's owned by the strata, and they pay strata fees every month. So yes, there's green space, but they don't actually own the land below them either. So I just wanted to clarify that as well.
Thank you, Mr. Aerosmith. Any questions at this time? Thank you.
Thanks.
Other people who have had an opportunity that would like a second opportunity, please come forward now.
Thank you for giving me another opportunity.
It's Dina Forsyth, right?
I'm sorry, I apologize. Dina Forsyth, resident of Canoe on 51st Street.
Thank you.
I'm involved in lending personally. I have no invested interest. This was I really went personally back and forth on the decision because I thought I might want to downsize. But when I take into the personal experience of the problems we went through with my daughter's trailer that was 20 years old, to buying in Canoe Creek Estates, which is a modular home similar to what will be going on there, with the exception hers is a double wide, where she owns her land and a $50 a month strata fee. Her monthly payments were less because she was turned down through the bank on anything else, not credit or nothing. I did speak directly to the banks. I've done lending for years. I've got 25 years of experience. And if you do some research, you'll see that they are classified as a chattel. If you look at the definition of what a chattel is a movable option. We're not talking modular home, which is built on a different truss system. We're talking about manufactured homes, which are built on steel so that they're movable. There has been new regulations that help protect people from having these mobile homes moved, because there's an onus on the landowner of the park to give them some compensation, but there has also been a lot towards the financing end. And my big concern is I've experienced on both ends of the stick. I've turned people down because there is too much risk involved in a modular home that it is, as far as the bank is concerned, a depreciating asset. It's the bank that says it's a depreciating asset. How viable is that for a community to stick mobile homes? None of the community has a problem with manufactured mobile homes. We live in them. I bought one for my daughter on property. I didn't buy it, but she bought it. It's not a stigmatism, and it's not in my backyard, that we're not concerned about that. We're concerned about the viability of this community that we have worked so hard to bring out of the stigmatism of this area. And we're doing it. Our houses are getting fixed up. We're getting 100-year-old houses that now are just showpieces. We just don't want rent park in there. We don't want to see 20 years down the road. What happens in the instance that someone defaults or they can't refinance their equity? It's fact, it's factual, and anybody can look it up. CMHC has regulations on a park rental. It has to be totally CMHC financed. So I can walk in there with 80% down. I am still required to pay a CMHC fee to be insured because of the risks that the banks are taking. If I walk in and buy one on my own property that's set up correctly, I do not. I can put 20% down. I don't have those extra fees. So you walk into a manufactured home park, you always, if you want to borrow any money, are always tied in there. You cannot touch the equity on that home. So I can go in and I can spend $180,000, do a 5% down. I might run into problems in 2 years. We're talking realistically here, affordable housing. And if we're all honest and affordable, a lot of us, we have $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 and $6,000 house. But you know what? It's the people that are most vulnerable that they're slated to be going into these homes. And it's irresponsible that you put them, allow and develop into a situation where they can't even access. So what happens if one of them gets sick and they can't make their payments? They can't draw on any equity on their home. Like, how is that addressing affordable housing? Affordable housing has to be defined before you decide whether or not a mobile home pad rental goes in there. I mean, plain and simple. And I'm very passionate about this because I do lend to these people and I do turn these people down on a daily basis. And I have had this as a personal situation. I have no vested interest in this because I'm not going to be selling the property. I am not going to be offering them mortgages or chattel mortgage. I have nothing invested in this other than personal experience, turning people down. I've approved some, yes. Credit union will do 1.5% over prime. Bank of Montreal will do 100, or not prime, excuse me, over posted mortgage rate, 1.5%. Some will do a 25-year, but I only found 2. TD Bank, I talked to them, they will not do it. I went into these institutes, I've contacted 3 different mortgage brokers, one from Kamloops, one from Vancouver, and one local here in Salmon Arm, and they all said the same thing. Even when I talked to the banks, the first thing they did was go, it can be done, but when it comes to the CMHC, where it has to be approved, there is more regulations pertaining to it. You have to think, it is a risk-based lending. There is no land to give the bank the security to be more lenient in that. I guess I could read you an article here that covers about 5 different mortgage brokers.
I think we understand.
And it comes directly from Mortgage Trends. It's not my article. It's not a local mortgage broker's article. It's not a property person's article. It's actual article written on the trends pertaining to the 183,000 households living in manufactured homes in parks that can no longer access their equity. New regulations, plain and simple. Do we want that? Do you want to be the one that the young family goes bankrupt because they can't access the money? Do it responsibly. Do it because you care. It's all about caring, and we in Canoe care. All my kids live in Canoe. One of them, they live in a house. It's $1,100 a month. They had 5% down. My neighbor that backs onto me has a lovely little property on a 1/4-acre parcel. He's asking $299. The mortgage payment on that is less. There's a 2016 mobile in Canoe Creek Estates that was just put in there. He's asking $199,000. His payment's about $1,100. He owns the land. Another one down the street for $255. The affordable housing in what context it's being spoken to is there. It is there. People are just choosing not to get it. Ask yourself, why? Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for Ms. Forsyth? Thank you. Any others like a second opportunity to speak? I'm going to ask for a third time. Give everybody a chance.
I'm not going to be that long this time, but I do have to contradict some of Dina's comments. From my understanding, as long as I've known her, she's been a financer of RVs.
Okay, so Mr. Smith, I don't want you talking about somebody else. If you
Okay.
want to talk about facts, that's fine.
Okay, well, you can refinance a home if you're going to, I think that's an incorrect way to put it. You can finance a home, a modular home, at any age as long as it's being recertified. And you can do a 1981 as long as it's been electrically recertified, and they can get a 25-year amortization too. So to use scare tactics to state that you can't, you're going to be responsible for people and families going into losing their homes because they can't refinance them. One of the reasons CMHC has changed all its rules is so that Canadians won't use their homes as piggy banks and keep taking the equity out. It's been one of the main focuses, and they've also made rules against refinancing regular homes now to any more than 80% of the value, and CMHC won't refinance a regular home, a stick-built home, above 80% value, and so the banks have chosen to do that themselves. There are Royal Bank, and Chad's a mortgage broker, so you can confer with him. Royal Bank, Bank of Montreal, CIBC, and TD will all do them at their discounted rates of 3.69% if they're CMHC insured. We do this every day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to call for a third time. Is there any other speakers for this hearing?
I just wanted to clarify a little bit about the CMHC rules. Those are the B20 guidelines, which I'm sure a lot of you have heard about, which includes the stress test. The first round was brought in on October 17th of 2017, which did take away the opportunity for refinances to have CMHC insurance. But I don't think that we should be making a decision for the long-term development of our community based on a rule that has only been in effect for a couple of years and might not be in effect a few years from now. We also used to have 0% down 40-year insured mortgages, and those are no longer a thing. So I don't think that the particulars of mortgage qualification for the borrowers should really come into play on this. Yes, a mobile home has to have CMHC regardless of the loan to value, but many purchasers of regular homes choose to insure their mortgages with CMHC anyways because it unlocks a lower interest rate for the borrowers. So I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Council, do you have any questions for any of the speakers?
I don't have any mortgage questions.
Thank you. I'm going to ask for a third and final time then. Is there anyone else that would like to speak?
I'd like to speak. I haven't spoken.
Please come forward.
My name is Beverly Miller. I live at 7050 70th Avenue Northeast. We moved to Salmon Arm about 13 years ago and eventually ended up in overlooking Canoe. and it's a beautiful little village. At this point, what I would like to do is just thank our mayor and our council for their great patience in listening to everybody. And sometimes we all get off track, and that's understandable because this is an issue that to many people is near and dear. Mortgages and money and lending and things like that are part and parcel, I guess, of this. But I think if council can please remember that this is a community. This is a very small community. And in the 11 years that we've been here, we've seen it build, we've seen it develop, and it's a lovely community. And there are many people here also who are very adamant about keeping it that way, having it community, and who fear that the development that is under consideration tonight would spoil that. So that's all I can say on behalf of that. I applaud everybody for speaking as well as they have, and I appreciate the council taking the time to hear everybody. Thank you.
Thank you for coming forward. Any questions for Bev? Thank you. Anyone else like to speak? It's your last opportunity.
People seem to be getting hung up on the pad rent portion of this. What we have to remember is that every single person in this room has a different financial situation. Just because it doesn't work for one group of people, we sold 33 of these in 2.5 years, and it works very well for them, or else they wouldn't have sold. There's a lot of people that are looking for this option, and right now, almost every zoning is available in Salmon Arm except for this one. So why do you think there's so many people looking for it? Is because it's not been made accessible to people, and for a lot of people's financial situations, and I understand some people don't understand it or they don't like it, but for a lot of people it works well. Someone mentioned that we can't put modular homes into a manufactured home park. If you look at the manufactured home park bylaw, we can put both Z240 and A277 homes into the manufactured home park, so we can in fact put modulars in there. A lot of people have been saying this is a kind of seeing as a one or the other kind of thing, like either it's R6 or condos, but really at this point it's an all or not, it's a R6 or nothing, because nobody's lining up to buy it to build condos. It was rezoned to build condos. The guy went bankrupt, and then through one of the hottest housing markets in Salmon Arm's history, nobody's gone through with an offer. So it's not a one or the other. It's 60 affordable homes, or we wait longer. And if we're willing to wait longer for affordable homes, then that's your guys' decision. But we're ready to do it right now. There was mention of them being used as vacation properties. Out of the 33 that we did in the last one, not one was used as a vacation property, and still isn't. So I don't know if that makes much of a difference, but just in my experience, it doesn't happen. And finally, I'd just like to say, Canoe is a great community, and I agree, like if you go down to the, what's it called, where they have the train with the music, a lot of people
Holiday
say
train.
The holiday train, yeah. The one in Canoe is better. I've never been to it, but I'll have to find out for myself next year. They do have a lot of community spirit out there. I think this is going to really just add to it. It's 60 more people that are just looking for a place to live. I don't think the proximity to the lake should really factor in on affordability. Affordability is affordability. Why can't people that are in their first home, they know how to swim, they know how to paddleboard, why can't they go in the lake too? I think it's a perfect place for it. And then finally, they say this isn't the right place for affordable housing. Then where is the right place? And who's going to do it?
Thank you. Councillor Flynn, did you have a question?
Yeah, I had a couple questions.
Okay, for Mr. Tarno.
For Mr. Tarno, because
Okay.
he's there right now.
Okay.
So, design building guidelines. We hear quite often in stratas and in even R1 developments that there's guidelines, and we can't enforce them in R1. are you going to have regulations, rules, guidelines as to what people can do, color code, all of that stuff?
We have a set of rules. We don't have anything specific to color code. In our last development, that wasn't something that we took on. It turned out nice. It's something that we could definitely look at, though.
And then one of the issues I've heard with rental in our community is 1, children, and 2, pets. Will this have I mean, you're not strata, so you won't have a strata council. Will you have some of the homeowners together to deal with rules and regulations? Will you have restrictions on pets and on children?
There's no restriction on children. There are a few restrictions on pets. Dogs are allowed, cats are allowed, but just not a bunch of them.
Okay, so number of pets is a restriction. And you and your family will manage this as opposed to a strata board or council?
Correct, with the help of a park manager.
Okay, park manager. And then just a question, and it's not really part of the rezoning, and this is where it's tough to balance rezoning and variances, but some of the letters have been concerned about no fence on Canoe Beach Drive, and only individual fences, not standard. Will there be any rules on those fences and what people can put there? Because I understand that was staff that didn't want that. I might be wrong, but I thought I heard that didn't want a fence along Canoe Beach Drive, and some people haven't wanted or have wanted a fence. Can you clarify that for me?
I'll ask the Director of Development Services.
Your Worship, it was actually Kerry that said when he was canvassing some of the neighbors around the properties, it was suggested that a fence along Canoe Beach Drive and 45th would give sort of a compound look to it, and I agreed with that.
Okay. So if it's not done uniformly, there will be some rules around what people can do and what type of fencing.
So down the sides, we've got the one side has chain link, and then if they wanted to connect into the chain link down the front, that would be fine. It would just have to match.
Okay, thank you. Those were just from some of the letters and emails. Those were some of the concerns. I think that was all I had for you at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't think we have any other questions right now. Council, does any councillor have a question for any of the presenters? Anyone else like to present? Okay, I'm going to close this public hearing, and we're going to go on to this next one. So, this public hearing is a zoning text amendment for zoning bylaw number 2303, section 11, R6 Mobile Home Park Zone. And I'll ask the Director of Development Services to explain the text amendments.
Your Worship, bylaw number 4310 is intimately tied to bylaw number 4309, and it is a proposal to amend the text of the R6 zone by adding section 11.5, minimum parcel area. Add the following subsection. Notwithstanding, the minimum parcel area for a mobile home park may be reduced to an area not less than 1 hectare when land dedication is provided for road widening or when a road reserve covenant is secured by the municipality for road widening. And the purpose of that particular text amendment is to allow for a minimum parcel size for a mobile home park to be less than 2 hectares. Because right now, you cannot develop a mobile home park on anything less than 5 acres of land. So right there, that restricts most of the properties in the urban area. The second text amendment, maximum density, add the following subsection. Notwithstanding, the maximum density may be increased higher than 17 dwelling units per hectare to a limit not exceeding the maximum density policies of the official community plan. The purpose of that text amendment is to bring the R6 zone more in line with the R1 and R4 zones that allow for a higher density than what is now allowed in the R6 zone. The R6 zone currently, with only 17 dwelling units per hectare, and I shouldn't say only because 17 dwelling units per hectare is quite a lot. It's at the higher end of the low density spectrum, but it is still lower than the R1 density permitted. And so what this text amendment does is it brings the maximum density to a level that does not exceed what the official community plan land use designation is. In this case, the land use designation of the properties under application is medium density, which allows a maximum of 40 units per hectare. What is being proposed with the mobile home park development by the Tarnos is far less than 40 units per hectare, but it's greater than 17 units per hectare, and it still actually falls within the low density category.
Great, thank you. I won't ask for the applicant to come forward because the City of Salmon Arm is the applicant to this, but I will open the hearing up to anyone that would like to speak to it. Would anyone like to come forward and speak to the text amendment suggested? I'll call a second time. I'll call a third time. This one's kind of dull. Council, does any of the council have questions? Okay, I will close this hearing and we'll move on to the third one. Third hearing is zoning amendment application ZON 1142, Perfection Builder Holders Limited, Goche E&M 210 and 2150 14th Avenue Southeast, R1 to R8. I'd ask the Director of Development Services to explain the proposal.
Your Worship, bylaw number 4311 proposes to rezone lots 6 and 7, Plan EPP 67515 from R1 single family residential to R8 residential suite. The two properties are located in the new subdivision just south of Hillcrest School at 2110 and 2150 14th Avenue Southeast. There are single family dwellings planned for these lots, and plans are in the building department for dwellings here. And with R8 zoning, each dwelling could have a legal basement suite. The lots may be large enough for a detached suite, but detached suites are not being proposed on either of these lots.
Thank you. Is the applicant in the audience? Okay. Is it possible to show the zoning map, Appendix 3? Because it kind of puts it in perspective. So this is the blue piece is Hillcrest School. The brown properties are all zoned R8. The applicant is asking to zone those two in the middle from R1 to R8. Is there anyone who would like to come forward and speak to this application? Asking a second time? A third time? Does anyone on council have a question around this proposal? Seeing none, I will close this public hearing and we'll move on to reconsideration of bylaws. So, reconsideration of bylaws 22.1. We have a motion on the screen, or it's going to be on the screen here, I think. There we are. Could I have a mover for that motion so that we can get it on the floor? Councillor Lavery, seconder, Councillor Flynn. I'll open it up to council. Questions to staff to start with. Any questions for staff? Councillor Flynn.
Thank you, Worship. I did want to ask staff, the value of the DCCs has been commented on. about 570,000, I believe. And then the off-site servicing has been talked about in the magnitude of a total of $1 million, I believe. Is that accurate figures?
Your Worship, the staff report refers to 920,000 for off-site services, and that number was relayed from the Tarnos, which I understand came from an engineering consultant.
And that was assuming they got the variance that perhaps they're not asking for, which is a whole other discussion, on the Lot 1 piece of sidewalk, or CBD, Canoe Beach Drive improvements?
I think that's for everything without variances.
Okay.
But I'm just guessing.
So about $1.5 million approximately total.
With development cost charges? Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, Councillor Flynn? Does any councillor have a question for staff before we go to comments? Councillor Walsh-Richmond.
So the property was rezoned in 2006, and then a development permit came in 2010. Is that your recollection, or?
Your Worship, 2006, the property was rezoned R4, and then that same year in 06, the first development permit for 50 units was approved.
I see. Okay. And prior to that, it had been R1?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions for staff? Okay, we have a motion on the floor. I'll open up to comments. Any councillor want to go first?
That's usually your job, and now you're there.
Councillor Flynn, thanks for volunteering.
I didn't see anybody else jumping to push their buttons. What's that? I'd defer to the Queen of Canoe if she wants to go first.
Okay, Councillor Walsh-Richmond.
So,
Please speak right into your mic, nice and loud.
What I'd like to say is, for the most part, decisions made at this table involve compromise. And compromise is more difficult when there's no one here to tell you what they think. And we often go through hearings where nobody comes. So we just kind of talk to each other and make a decision and move on. So I really appreciate hearing from all of you. And I know this is a familiar space for us. We're here every week. Come on by and see us. But it's a new space for some of you. And I just want you to know that if this is your first time speaking in front of council, I really admire your guts and your bravery. And I appreciate you. I also admire the guts and the bravery of the proponents or the applicants. It's not easy putting yourself on the line, trying to improve community. I have deep respect for what you've gone through to get it to this place. But my comments are going to more or less stop there. And I'm going to say to you the same thing I said last time we had a public hearing, which is if we continue to build single-family homes on single-family lots, this housing problem will never go away, ever. So it's about density. It's also about supply. Right now, Canoe has a very homogeneous housing mix. And I do think it would need... I understand the developers telling me that that property is tough to develop. I accept your rationale. But I have worked hard as a co-chair of the Housing Task Force to understand how housing supply works. We cannot control price. We have absolutely no control over price. We can only control density, and that is the only tool that we have. And so because I feel that the long term for Salmon Arm is absolutely going to require higher density, I simply cannot vote to change the zoning of that property because I feel that it is appropriately zoned. And I'm very sorry to have to say that. But that's what it means. We need to understand housing, and housing is about supply, not about price. And so if we have a low supply and a high demand, the market will set the price. We don't get to do that. So I'll use the only tool that I really have in this case. which is density. And so for those reasons, I won't be supporting it.
Thank you, Councillor Wallace-Richmond, and thank you for volunteering to go first. Councillor Flynn.
Thank you, Worship, and I will probably not be as eloquent as Councillor Wallace-Richmond or as succinct and short, but I will give it my best shot. I think there's pros and cons to being here as long as I have, and some of us at this table, and there's pros and cons to being in a small community. And one of the cons is no matter what I decide tonight, I'm going to upset some people. Some people are going to agree with me and some aren't. Most of those people are either friends or acquaintances that I care about a lot. So that being said, I was here when this property was rezoned. And I think it's important to remember that in the OCP designation, this was R1. And quite often, and I think one thing that public doesn't understand when they get involved in something like this as passionately as everybody has, is that sometimes it's a developer that ends up making the case to change a zoning, and the zone is specific to that piece of property at the time. And in 2004, I can't believe it was that long ago that it first came forward, and then 2006, I think that's the dates that our Director of Development Services said. But anyway, mid to late 2000s, we sat here and saw the proposal that somebody shared with us for the first lot. And in order to have this happen, we had to change the zoning from R1 to R4. And this was an exciting development. In fact, at the time, my wife and I talked about maybe that's where we want to go live, in these condos, townhomes. And since then, most of the people that have spoken tonight have become really good friends that live in Canoe, and it's an awesome community. I can't argue that. I do want to thank you all for your presentations. I will say right up front that I have to agree with Mr. Roy, who said that some of the comments and some of the tones of letters to me are surprising from Canoe and are a little disappointing to me personally, because renters of trailers or renters of pads who buy mobile homes have been talked about in a way that in many letters I don't think is appropriate or fair. I really appreciated, probably the least prepared and least expecting to speak, Mr. Matley, 6 weeks here, and called it a housing crisis. There's no housing availability. To me, he didn't care about land ownership. He cared about what the monthly cost is going to be and the ability to have something that he can call his own. I've driven out last week to 5 of our parks. I drove through them all: Canoe Creek, Lakeland, Broadview Villas, the one at the golf course. I went through 4 of them. I also went out and walked the property. And I walked through that area of Canoe and drove through the new development on the hill. And I've sat on the Economic Development Board for a number of years. And every year that we do planning with ECDEV, the #1 issue is affordable housing for staff. And every business talks about that. I don't think it's up to us to determine what is affordable, but there's no question in my mind that $1,000 to $1,300 or $1,400 a month compared to $2,000 or $2,300 or whatever is more affordable. Getting a mortgage, although not quite as easy, on a $130,000, $140,000 modular mobile home, whatever we call it, is a lot less than $400,000, which was the new development on Hillcrest. That was the starting point that we talked about 2 weeks ago. So in the province of BC, in the last election, the #1 issue was affordable housing. Councillor Harrison and I have kind of agreed on this over the years, that it's not our job as a municipality to fix affordable housing. That's changing a little bit now that the senior levels of government have brought money forward to help us deal with affordable housing in the spectrum that is the more vulnerable end and not private ownership. And we're working on that, and we have counselors that are experts in that. But I would be very disappointed if everybody doesn't remember how big an issue affordable housing was in our election and how big an issue it still is every day, provincially and federally. Driving through those mobile home parks, some are you own the land and some are you don't. I saw at the most 4 for sale signs, and I saw just as many sold signs. So there's not a lot of availability, and there's success in selling, regardless of mortgages and all of those things. They have sold. I've talked to 4 or 5 realtors, some not in Salmon Arm because I was just on Vancouver Island. I've talked to 2 to 3 local developers, and I've talked to 3 mortgage brokers, and only one of them was local. They don't know the specifics, and I just asked, is pad rental, mobile home, a viable low-end solution to the affordable housing? And to a T, they said whether I agree with a specific development, it is a viable solution. The fact that Lakeland sold in 3 years, sold out, tells me there's a demand. So I don't think that in my lifetime, and perhaps my son's lifetime, who lives in Salmon Arm and we managed to get into a home, that we will see an R4 come forward on that property. I think that time came and it didn't happen. And I also don't question that we are asking any developer that does R1, R6, R4, whatever happens there, to do an awful lot. And I've never really thought about it the way Mr. Smith put it, but that is one of our main roads, and we're asking a developer that only can do something on one side to do the whole solution, and we're not subsidizing. So, Ms. Cron, I love you dearly. You said that the temptation is the generosity and that there's too much being given. I think we're asking too much to realistically make that property ever viable. And we've got somebody today that is willing to build a sidewalk, build a new road with a sidewalk. I do want them to take one of their sites out and make it a park, but that's a whole other issue. I'm not willing to wait 10 to 15 to 20 years, and I think we need the lower cost affordable option for $1,000 to $1,500 a month rent combined with a mortgage, a pad rent combined with a mortgage, and I think this is an opportunity that can make significant improvements to Canoe in an amazing location that I think will fit in with the community. I'm sorry for those who are passionate against, but I will be voting in favor unless I hear something differently from enough of others that can change my mind. But I do appreciate everybody's input. As everybody that knows me understands, I'm as passionate as many of you were, and like Ms. Cron, I almost would cry when I'm there. But thank you everybody for your input. Thank you to the Tarnos. I think it's time that we move forward, and I never really got the saying a bird in hand is better than 2 in the bush, but I think it's appropriate here.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn. Thank you, Councillor Lindgren.
Thank you. So I also want to thank Carrie for the very well prepared presentation and the work that you guys have put into making this into a viable project. And I want to say thank you to the community for coming out and speaking passionately about your vision. And like Louise said, you know, a lot of times we have to make these decisions in a vacuum, and this is definitely not that. I spoke earlier about, a couple weeks ago, about what my concerns were, things like the green space and places for kids to play, if that's who we were marketing to, and the safety issue with the 45th Street going through. I'm also concerned about the design of a mobile home park in that spot and it creating a separate space. It's not a space where neighbors might walk because it's fenced in and it's facing inward. And so I think that erodes a little bit the sense of community that that Canoe is striving for. You know, part of what we get in a community is we want sidewalks because we walk past each other's houses and our kids ride their bikes to each other's house, and you can see in somebody's front yard and you can wave to them in the window and that sort of thing, and I think that will be missing in this park. I'm not convinced that this is an affordable housing option, though. You need a net income of $4,600 a month to afford this at about $1,400. And I don't know that that really falls into affordable housing. I think that compares with buying a place for about $280,000. Whether that's someplace at Country Gate where 2-bedroom units are selling for $175, or another condo or a townhouse development in town that might be a little bit more. I have to say that Thomas's comment about how you don't own the land under a condo, you know, in essence, that's kind of true. But the reality is that you benefit as the owner of the condo when the price of that land goes up. So you are reaping the benefits from that land. There were some comments about how this $425 is going to pay for sewer and water and lights and snow removal, and that's what I get at my condo for $187 a month. I get all those things included as well. And the taxes on my condo are about the same as they would be, you know, around $100 a month in the mobile or modular home park. So I think that there's a significant portion of money, and I mean, that's the reason that Tarnos wants to have a park with pad rent, because there is a profit margin there. That's why any developer is doing what they're doing. They need to make a profit. Fundamentally, I have a bit of a problem with people making a profit off the people who have the least amount of money in our community, but that's a separate issue. The developer talked tonight about how this is an increasing value on these houses, and how people bought them for one price and sold them for up to $60,000 more 4 years later. But the reality is that happened because people bought in early. They bought in before the park was done, and when the park was done, home values went up. So those home values went up to where they're no longer falling in the affordable housing. They're now $219,000 or more, and you still have the $425 pad rent. So now you're looking at equivalent to buying about $330,000 worth of condo or townhouse somewhere else. So the affordable portion is only going to be affordable for the first person who buys in. We have to make these decisions based on what's going to happen in the long term, not who owns the land, but what the land can be used for. And if we go ahead and zone this R6, and for some reason Tarnos back out, this is still going to be an R6 property that will no longer be within our purvey to decide what happens there. I have no doubt that Tarnos are interested in putting in a nice-looking, well-run park. But if for some reason they decide they don't want to own that anymore, or they don't want to develop it anymore, then we still have an R6 piece of land that we don't know what will happen with. I think that the best thing that's come out of this is that the conversations that have been had have galvanized the vision that Canoe wants to have for themselves. They've come together, they've formed associations, they've become empowered, I think, to move forward in a different direction. And I think that that's something that I want to support. I think this is a short-term solution to a long-term problem. I think density is where we need to go. I think we need to wait until the correct development comes along, and you know, with great respect for the developers, I have to vote against.
Thank you, Councillor Lindgren. Councillor Lavery.
Thank you, Mayor Harrison. First of all, thanks to the applicants for their good faith proposal, those who've contributed their thoughts in a respectful way, and I want to give a shout out as well to staff who've really laid out the history of the implications of each stage as we get here tonight. And it's pretty obvious, you know, Canoe's certainly the epicenter of community and earthquakes. and for the moment anyhow, cannabis. I just want to start off with, and others have referenced it, but my definition of affordable housing, and it's not in this context. We're not talking about government subsidized rental housing. We have some exciting things in the works in Salmon Arm. Some of them have been announced, and for that non-market government subsidized stuff, we are on the verge of huge additions. So the lens that I use here now gets down to the heart of the matter: is this affordable for non-subsidized, essentially retail market housing? And so my comments on that are based on that approach. I've heard a number of themes, certainly, that we received through correspondence, and tonight I'd like to reflect on some of them, Your Worship. I might take a minute or two, but I'm going to
take as much time as you need.
Go through as I can. We have had various opinions on rental versus ownership versus the hybrid proposal in front of us. There's been discussion about being a depreciating or appreciating asset, and in my opinion, any determination of that is really linked to the general economy as well as the desirability of the immediate neighborhood. And in my view, this is not and should not be actually a factor in a zoning decision. It's also mentioned in opposition to the proposal that this hybrid ownership pad rental proposal, because it lacks an equity stake in the dirt, if you will, is not the way to go. And it's suggested that that in itself is a reason for not rezoning. And I have to say really clearly that it's not up to me to take a stance on what an individual economic decision is. And even more so, some of the most current thinking, leading edge thinking about trying to get people into affordable housing is to look at ways of reducing equity to actually get in there. Now, this is not in the market. This is not in the proposal in front of us or in Salmon Arm, but there are some initiatives to create a land trust where 100% of the land is donated by a philanthropic individual or organization, and individuals can build homes without the land equity part. There's a provincial, relatively new government program that offers to take up a secondary mortgage of a part equity share up to 20% so that individuals can leverage and get in. Do they get the full equity return on either of those options? No, they don't, but they are in the market and they're developing equity. So I'm going to, again, state as clearly as I can here that it's not only not up to me to determine individual economic decisions, but I'm very hesitant in this current housing affordability crisis that we have to reject any idea that looks at reduced equity to get people into the housing market. And finally, I guess the aspects, and I've heard it from people who I know and I respect, they're the ones I've pondered the most. It's been brought up: rezoning the property, the decreased taxation opportunities for the city, a missed opportunity for increased density, and even other possible uses, including co-ops, social, and a gentleman referred to mixed housing that's market and non-market housing. I'm going to be as direct as I can here, because I think this is what it's called for. It's obvious, but this is not a publicly held piece of property, in my view. And nor do we have competing proposals in front of us. We do not have a group of 50 residents offering $40,000 each to buy the property and plan towards improvements on there, let alone looking for funding for an alternative, let alone paying the annual taxes. So the lens that I'm applying here in this matter is a lens of reasonableness, that in the midst of an affordable housing crisis. I believe the owners have looked for a range of reasonable R4 and R1 options over a considerable period of time. It's been referenced at our last council session up in the Hillcrest area. To much opposition, we approved a proposal that was essentially R1 density with R4 setbacks. And to my thinking, that is what we have in front of us here now. R1 density with somewhat less than R4 setbacks. My growing understanding, I come to the point where I recognize that manufactured and mobile home parks are indeed a legitimate part of the housing spectrum. And more importantly, they represent a critical housing stock for those on fixed and lower incomes. And I'm going to repeat that these type of housing is a legitimate part of the housing spectrum, and it does service a niche. I accept the proponent's rationale on this as being affordable, and in no way do I consider this to be some sort of self-serving, some of the words I've heard, false narrative, or affordability in disguise rationale. I do not view the lens that way. I would note last spring, the Premier of the province announced new provincial legislation, it's been referred to once or twice here, that provides for significantly increased security of tenancy for mobile home parks, for precisely the situation of those who own the unit, but they have the pad rental. And that tenancy puts a fairly significant onus on owners to not walk away. It also provides an onus for them to, in my view, to upkeep their equity on their property, and because there are situations where people let the mobile home park deteriorate and then sell it and flip it and do all that sort of stuff. The Premier also, in that announcement last year, also noted that in his own riding he had 12 mobile home parks, and he noted that this type of housing stock is important, and especially for those on lower and fixed incomes. So, Your Worship, we have a affordable housing crisis here. My perspective has been last week at our last council session, today at this session, and likely in sessions to come up, although we consider every option, every application differently, to seize every opportunity we have to get people into various bands of affordable housing. This is a reasonable proposal by decent folks. It addresses, in my view, legitimate affordable housing in a non-subsidized market, especially important for those on fixed incomes. It's the only proposal in front of us, and I will vote in favor of the rezoning. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lavery. Councillor Cannon.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, this has been a hard public hearing, long, I guess, 10:32, who's going to win the bet of when we're out of here. I would just like to say thank you, everyone that presented. This has been really hard for me because the developers, both the Tarnos and Richard Smith, Techmore Mortgages, are friends. So this has been tough for me, and a lot of the people that have presented are good friends as well. And that's what happens when you live in a small community, and I grew up in Canoe, so went to school at North Canoe School. So, you know, Canoe has a spot in my heart for sure. And, you know, I would also say it was brought up quite a few times of the company that owns the land, and it was brought up that it was through Techmar MIC funds. I think that's what was said. And I know by letters that we received from people in regards to that, there's a lot of good friends also that are invested in those funds. So I really felt the pressure, you know, on everyone that presented tonight. I was also at the table in 2004, 2006 when this rezoning of R4 medium density came to be. And I remember Canoe was excited about it at that hearing. And at the time, actually, the smaller piece of property was someone that worked for me. They had the Heritage House there, which was the property that was purchased at the time, as well as the packing house. I think that, I feel that Canoe is a diamond in the rough, but it's getting polished somewhat. I think with the development above the rezoning application that we're looking at, phase 1, 2, and 3 sold out very quickly, and there are some beautiful way more expensive houses up there. But, I mean, people invested in Canoe when they built their houses there. And I look at this property as really the last, like a flat piece of property in Canoe that is very desirable. So for me, I don't look at it, I guess I look at it as a zoning issue. Is the R6 the right zoning? And for me, I really feel strongly that R4 is a better zoning than R6. So I'm gonna keep, I'm not gonna support the zoning that's in front of us. R4 is what I think is the better zoning. And I can't really, I mean, we can argue whether it's affordable housing and, you know, I know a lot of us campaigned on that and it was asked at the all candidates forum, but I really don't see in the big picture that this is affordable housing. For me, it's, is this the right zoning for that property? And I don't feel that it is.
Thank you, Councillor Cannon. Councillor Lassen.
Yeah, thanks. And if I, can I get page 122 up? I was trying to get staff to do it earlier. It's just the zoning map. 122. Yeah. While he does that, I want to thank everyone who's come out today and spoke and taken the time to do the research and send me a bunch of mortgage information, which I found helpful. Councillor Flynn said that this is a tough one. He wasn't the guy who voted against Walmart and for it just before 2 elections, so I would call those 40 hours after 40 hours tougher. Here's the map that I want to show. James Jacobs wrote a book called The Life and Death of the Great American City, and Canoe essentially is a microcosm of our community. Canoe has everything. If you look at the bottom left, we've approved 130 some lots there for single family houses. The original proposal for that was large lot, single family lot, and medium density. We rezoned it to single family recently. Still nothing's happened on it. Just down to the south of it, where you can't see Club Shuswap, there's we've approved I don't even know what we call it, but a park model home park. And correct me if I'm wrong, but staff, I think it's 130 units, something like that.
That's correct.
Close by. And so what makes a great city is having some of everything. And the only thing that Canoe is lacking at this point is a medium density residential development or a high density residential development. And we see R8 here, we see UC1, we see the P1, we see the institutional, we see all of the other zones. The only thing we don't have there right now is the ability to put in a multifamily, multi-unit place. And when this proposal was brought to us, because I've been around that long too, you'll note the hair color change, we supported it because since I've been on council, we've seen things come to council. We've, the Tropic development, which was at the east end of 74th, which came forward and they said they wanted to do a trailer park, and Canoe came back and said, no, we want stick-built houses. There were some other smaller lots inside that they wanted to do infill and some other things, and Canoe came out and said, no, we demand better, we want more. And so, again, we're getting an application which I can't support, but I appreciate that we're getting it. And the conversation around affordable housing is one that we're trying our best to solve, and I appreciate the work that the other councillors are doing on this committee, but that's never been our job. And since I guess it's been 20 years since there's been federal and provincial funding to address those needs. And then the housing prices that we're experiencing in Salmon Arm and the house prices that we're experiencing in Salmon Arm are not unique to Salmon Arm. There was a structural deficit of homes being built between the financial crisis of 2008 and 2015. If you guys saw a spec house in those years, yeah, you might have seen one or two. But then we saw the building booms, and every city in British Columbia is trying to catch up. everyone is seeing record building years. Everybody is building and building and building, but we missed some time. And so no federal, provincial housing initiatives for a long time, a structural deficit, and here we are in this housing issue, this housing crisis as it's been called, but the housing shortage and the high prices. And so we do need the supply. But in order to get that supply, we have to sometimes protect land for the higher best use. And I think that the R4 in this case is the thing that's missing in Canoe and would be the highest and best use for this property. So I won't vote to support this rezoning at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lassen. Do any other councillors want to make comment? Okay, my turn then. Thank you very much, first of all, to everyone who presented. I think it really is, it's really helpful to council to hear your thoughts on rezonings. And so I really appreciate the respectful tone for the most part of the hearing, and also the compassion and the passion that was put into your presentations. The housing spectrum, from supportive housing all the way through to single-family housing, the very most difficult housing to provide is entry-level housing. Partly because the provincial government monies are not aimed at that. And the reason it's the hardest to meet is because of the cost of the land and the cost of development. It's just too expensive. And unfortunately, R4 built houses are not affordable to young families. The R4 houses in Salmon Arm are all over $400,000. Young families can't afford them. And I hear this evening, and it's absolutely accurate, that you can get a mortgage on an R4 house. But if you're a young family, you can't afford to pay the mortgage payment. So it doesn't help you. I heard from many that the land is not owned, and that's acknowledged. And this is not perfect. It would be better if the land was owned. But I have to go back to, if the land's owned, the price goes up beyond entry-level housing. There was talk about who would live in these modular homes. And I think the target for the applicants, there's two targets. One is young families who are trying to get into something that they can live in, hopefully build some equity, and eventually move ahead into some type of more advanced housing. And then there is seniors who are actually going the opposite way. They're downsizing. And both those ownerships are positive for the city. Seniors are just as important as young families here. Seniors run this place. They volunteer for everything. And seniors now are different than seniors 25 years ago. People are retiring at 55, 60 years old and have all kinds of energy. And we know through the events that we see that the seniors do a lot in this town. And so when I hear people say, oh, it's seniors housing and that's a bad thing, I do not believe that. I think it's a positive thing as well. But I think it's a combination that would happen. And the examples that were given were a combination. And so we have a developer who has come forward, who's prepared to provide 60 units, plus the amenities. And modular homes are not the same as they were 25 years ago. They're not mobile homes anymore. The cost of the works, and a few people talked about them, and unless the general taxpayer subsidizes the cost of off-site works, this property is going to be too expensive to develop. And a general taxpayer should not have to offset the costs on this property or any other privately owned property. Because if you offset the cost by the general taxpayer on one property for one developer, how are you going to not do it for the next? So the off-site works are $920,000 on this property. The on-site works are $1 million. The assessed value of the land is $896,000. And the DCCs are $571,000. I'll note that in the DCCs are for sewer, for roads, for water. They're also for parks. $63,000 of those DCCs go into the parks fund. So there's substantial contribution. And that is not something that the city can afford to do. In order to be able to pay for that, the developer has to come up with a plan that's going to be able to cover those upfront costs. That's why there's no R4 or R1 development on that property, because you can't make it work. And I wish I could say I think it's going to get better, but I don't think so. Things are getting more expensive all the time. Single-family houses now in Salmon Arm, on a single-family lot, $750,000. That's how much you need to do it. So, for me, I think this is an opportunity. And I agree with much of what Councillor Lavery had to say, that I don't feel it's my place to say, you can't afford to live there, or it's not right for you, or it's not affordable for you. That's a choice that individual people make. It's their economics. And for us to make that decision, I don't think is right. So I will support the application, and unless there's other speakers, I will call the question here shortly. Councillor Flynn.
Thank you, Worship, and I will ask everyone at this table to recall their conversations in October. And I mentioned earlier that I was a little disappointed in some of the tone of what people said, and I'm a little disappointed that somebody would say that the developer shouldn't make money. It's like development's a bad word. We've got somebody putting maybe $3 million forward to try to provide us with another option in our housing spectrum and take significant risk with their own money and provide a legacy to the son to manage a property that is badly needed right now. Some people presented and said square peg in a round hole. R4 is a square peg in a round hole. I can guarantee you, sitting here, that there will not be an R4 development for 10 or 15 years. I just don't see it. R1, local developer said the lots would be $140,000 to $160,000. No view, train on the other side, beautiful spot right by the beach and everything else, but it's not going to happen unless people in Canoe and the rest of Salmon Arm are willing to subsidize $1 million or $1.5 million of the off-sites. So I urge council, and I know right now it's a 3-4, but I urge everybody to remember their discussions at the all candidates and the affordable housing. And I urge you to think about whether R4 is the square peg in the round hole. It was designed for a specific development that never happened, and that person went bankrupt. I just can't see sitting here, well, I won't be sitting here in 15 years because I've upset a lot of people tonight, but I can't see sitting here 10 years from now and having that vacant still. I just don't think that's the right answer for our community. So I'll appeal to everybody at this table. I'm probably not going to get anywhere, but Councillor Lavery said what I was trying to say much better than I did, and I think we're making a mistake, but I will abide by the decision and thank everybody for their time.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn. Any other councillors like to speak before I call a question? Okay, all those in favor? All those opposed? Councillor Lindgren, Councillor Wallace-Richmond, Councillor Cannon, Councillor Eliason opposed. The motion fails. We'll move on to the next motion. So reconsideration of bylaw number 22-2, City of Salmon Arm zoning amendment bylaw number 4310, text amendment zoning bylaw, third reading. I would just ask the CAO for direction on this. It was tied to this application, and what would his direction be for us?
Your Worship, I would recommend that you vote against this.
Okay. Thank you. Councillors, do you have any questions?
There isn't a motion on the floor yet.
Councillor Eliason moved, second. Councillor Lavery. Any comments or questions by council? All those in favor? All opposed? Motion fails. Reconsideration of bylaws 22.3, City Salmon Arm Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 4311. I need a motion. Councillor Eliason, second. Councillor Lindgren, thank you. Any questions or comments from council on this R1 to R8 zoning? All those in favor? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay. Now we're going to move into variance hearings. So I will have an opening statement, and I know there's people who have waited for the first variance hearing for some time, and I very much appreciate your patience. So I will go ahead and read the opening statement. I would like to open up the hearings for variance permit 491 and variance permit 493. Following the reading of the motion, I'll request the Director of Development Services to explain the development. I will then ask 3 times for submissions from the gallery, giving the opportunity for the applicant and public to speak. Council will also have the opportunity to ask questions. Once this is complete, I will close the hearing and the council will vote on the motion. We have the motion up on the screen. Is there a mover for the motion, please? So moved. Councillor Eliason, second. Councillor Lavery. I would ask the direction of the CAO regarding this variance motion, considering that the bylaw to rezone did not pass. What would his advice be?
Considering that the rezoning was defeated, Your Worship, I believe that we should defeat this variance as well.
All right. Council, do you have any comments? Councillor Flynn?
Yeah, I do have a comment. I'm not sure if we will ever see a new mobile home park application, but all I would say is most of these variances were because our bylaw is 40 years old, and I would like to see us work on a new mobile home park bylaw so that people can't pick apart variances that really aren't variances. They're just bringing us to the 2020s. So I'm not saying that has to be urgent, but I really do think that our mobile home park bylaw needs to be updated.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn. I would agree with you. I think it's best to defeat this motion, though, and then work on that later. Any other comments from council? All those in favor? Well, I fooled a couple of you. All those opposed?
Opposed.
Okay, we'll move on to development variance permit application number VP 493. Brown, C&D Brown Johnson Land Surveyors. We have a motion on the screen. Councillor Flynn is in conflict here, so we'll give him a chance to get out. Could I have a mover to this variance motion? Thank you, Councillor Wallace-Richmond. A seconder? Councillor Lindgren, thank you very much. I'll ask the Director of Development Services to explain this variance.
Your Worship, this is a variance permit application for 1230 52nd Avenue Northeast in Raven subdivision. And there's 2 variances being requested, one to the servicing bylaw to not have to upgrade the south half of 52nd Avenue to the urban standard, including basically a sidewalk, about 29 meters of frontage. There's no other sidewalks in the vicinity. Staff are recommending support of that variance, and also to reduce the minimum width for a panhandle from 6 meters to 5.3 meters. Because along that east side of the property, there's a constraint of the house, the corner of the house, the setback of the house to the proposed parcel line of the panhandle, and a retaining wall. The panhandle width is 8 meters at the entrance, and the clear width is at least 4.5 meters wide along the panhandle. So from a safety perspective, there's no concerns.
Thank you very much. I'd ask the applicant if he'd like to come forward. Thank you, Mr. Johnson and Browns, for being so patient.
I had a choice whether to sit here tonight or not. Joe Johnson, 5460 40th Avenue Northwest. Thank you, Mayor and Council, for the opportunity to speak on behalf of my clients, Cam and Daphne Brown, and their requests for 2 variances. Regarding the upgrade of 52nd Avenue, we believe that this should be considered as an infill situation. The location of the house makes it impossible to create more than one lot. 52nd Avenue appears to meet city requirements other than provision of a sidewalk. This area has relatively low volumes of traffic as there are no connections to through roads. It's just a loop. There is no sidewalk, and it does not appear that there are plans for sidewalk in this area. Both planning and engineering staff have recommended approval of this variance. We are also requesting a small variance to reduce part of the panhandle width from 6 meters to 5.36 meters. The average width of the panhandle is 6.6 meters. There have been narrow panhandles approved in the past. Emerald Green Estates has 3.5 meter wide panhandles on adjacent lots for shared access. My client is prepared to provide an easement over the proposed house lot in order to provide a full 6 meter wide corridor if staff, mayor, and council deem that necessary. Again, both planning and engineering staff have recommended approval of this variance. I would like to address some of the concerns raised by the neighbors. There was concern that this was the first of many panhandle lots for the area. I have reviewed the area and find that because of house locations, there is no potential for other lots to subdivide within that center area without cooperation of 2 or more adjacent property owners to provide the necessary panhandle width. There was a statement that subdivisions are prohibited in this neighborhood. This is not the case. The lot immediately to the east of the property was subdivided in 1994. There are no subdivision restrictions registered on title. There was concern about preserving large lots in the area. There are 44 lots that front on the 4 roads that service this area. The vacant lot that the Browns are proposing is equal in size or larger than 29 of the 44 lots. The proposed house lot is equal in size or larger than 20 of the 44 lots. So the size is consistent with lot sizes in the area. Browns live in the house on this property as they have sold their other home. While this is not part of the hearing, I think it is important to mention that an application to rezone the property to R8 has been submitted to the city and will be the subject of a public hearing in the weeks to come. There are R8 lots in the area, with the closest one adjacent to the subject property on the east side. I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have through the mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Councillors, do you have any questions for Mr. Johnson at this time? Okay, I think not right now. Thank you very much. Okay, I would ask if there's any member of the public who would like to come and speak about this variance. This is your opportunity to come forward.
Is that recess? We get to go home?
11 o'clock, the alarm goes off here. So we're just fixing it. Yes, please come forward. It's okay.
Your worship, we are going to need a motion to go past 11 p.m.
Okay. Could I have a motion, please? Thank you, Councillor Lavery, Councillor Wallace-Richmond. All those in favor? Thank you. Thank you for being so patient. Please go ahead.
Yes, I'm addressing, and thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight, Your Worship, with the members of the council. I'm Jessica Hauser. I'm at 5081 14th Street Northeast in Raven. You do have my letter that I wrote previously and sent to you on the email. I'm just going to summarize for the benefit of those who didn't see the letter. This is more or less penned between my husband and myself, but this is what I'd like to say. I'm absolutely opposed to this variance, and I feel that I'm opposed to a house on a new lot blocking the lake view for some of the neighbors that will be affected by this. They'll be also destroying the aesthetics of this area for others, and probably diminishing the value of the properties. And there's no doubt about that. It is going to diminish the value of the properties that are concerned around this area, that are too small. Some of them are too small to benefit from this windfall. So, in allowing the variance to go ahead, this will open up for others, I feel, a precedent setting that may allow others to follow suit, and this neighborhood will quite plainly not be the same as it is today. We do have a lovely eco space in the middle, and it was created originally by the developer, who obviously saw some wisdom in creating this green space, allowing the lots to be the size they are, and sharing the green space together. And you know, at this point, I must say that this is a unique area in Raven. Raven itself is unique. It has the advantage of having the in-ground wiring, so that we don't have the telephone poles. So there's something kind of special about it. It doesn't have a lot of traffic, as the surveyor just mentioned. And we hope that in respecting the kind of planning that was in effect at the time that it was put together, that we can really appreciate, as all do. I mean, I know I spoke about the birds and the bees and the kind of the garden-oriented area that we have, but you know, there's a little bit of merit to that in understanding about our eco values too in a property that is available for us for others too that come into the area and buy these homes. So all I can say is that the neighborhood definitely is going to be reduced, and it will, as I say, open the door to more development in this area at some point in time. And there's no way, I don't think that there will be an opportunity for others if it's allowed. It's a mature neighborhood, and further will be disturbing a lot of pensioners and young families in the immediate area. We are going to have an increase in noise, more light pollution, and the stress that we go through as we try to prevent this from happening. And of course, we know the variance permit is what is being discussed tonight, but we know it is leading to construction of another dwelling at the back of the property. And this is just we must vote. We ask you to vote it down, but we certainly do not approve of it. And you know, I have one question to ask here before I go, and I'm going to say, why should the owners of Lot 10 have the right to devalue our properties so that they can maximize their own investment at the expense of their neighbors? Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to know which lot's yours. Could we just expand that map out just so I can see which lot is Miss Hauser's? Where do you live?
Directly east, 272.
So,
Where that hand is right there?
Are you speaking of?
272 has the street numbers.
To the right is 14th Street. To the right of the picture is what, 14, yes.
Sorry, we're, got it right there. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your input. Is there anyone else that would like to come forward and speak on this variance?
Thank you, Mayor and the Council, for letting us speak. My name is Charles Miner, and I live on Lot 1281.
Thank you, Charles. Thank you for your patience this evening. Go ahead.
The southeast corner of that proposed lot is my northwest corner. Okay, that's my house. I feel the neighborhood has houses around the outside edge, and the center is a green open space. It's airy, birds and all kinds of critters come in there, and it's light and nice. If we put a house in there, it's going to be more light. There's going to be cars coming down the hill into that lot on the panhandle, and they're going to shine in our backyards. It's just, in talking to the neighbors and walking the street around there, most of them did not want it, as per the signatures we collected. There were 4 people on holidays, and they didn't have a chance to do this. There would have been more given time, but I just hope the council votes to turn this down, because leave this area the way it is. Don't go changing it. It's fine. I feel bad for talking about keeping the large lots after talking about affordable housing. Well, I bought here 20 years ago, and it was affordable then for me. I've been retired for a number of years. I have no problem with this. I do not want this to pass. It's just going to downgrade it and decrease my value of my property, and just the whole thing is just, had I known that was ever going to happen, I would have never bought there to begin with. You know, I like the narrow streets. There are no sidewalks. We're old. We don't like to shovel them. We walk the streets. I would reread my letter in here that you got, but there's no use boring you with it. But it's how I feel about this. I think the way these lot lines, you know, I have the same picture here I could show you of that inner core, and the property lines don't quite line up with the actual houses. Maybe this is different than mine. I can show you mine, but it doesn't much matter. But that's my lot. We like it. I don't know what else I can say, but once again ask you to vote this down. You know, why do we want to, if it needs 6 meters, why do we ask to lessen that restriction? Do we keep asking for that to be narrowed down until there's nothing left but a trail walking in? I guess I've said enough. I'm not happy with this, so.
Great, thank you very much for speaking with us.
Well,
appreciate it. Council, do you have any questions?
I have a clarification question for staff, if I may.
Okay, can we just wait till our presenter is finished?
Yeah.
Okay. Have you?
Oh, I'm done if he wants to ask me a question.
Yeah, I think he's going to ask staff a question.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Yes, Councillor Eliason?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the opportunity. Through you to staff, the lot in question, if it wasn't under application for subdivision, would they be able to put a shop or an outbuilding in the back? And how big? I know if they rezoned and made it an R8 thing, there's a limit of about 1,000 square feet to any dwelling that's included, but is there a limit to any garage or shop that can be put back there if they wanted to have a big truck or RV in it?
10% of the parcel area.
So how much is that? And then I've got a follow-up. while we do that, through you, Your Worship, to the Director of Engineering and Public Works, is this area serviced by stormwater? Or was the reason for the large lots at the time, some of them were not serviced by storm?
Director of Engineering and Public Works.
There is storm in Raven. I'm not sure about the upper bench there. I'll have to check the map.
Okay, thank you. And then I'll wait for
Okay.
the answer.
While we're waiting for that answer, is it okay if we continue?
Please and thank you.
Okay. Other presenters who would like to speak, come forward, please.
Now, in regard to that easement, it goes right on our property. I'm Dean Chamberlain, 1251 50th Avenue Northeast, and that easement goes right straight through my back by my side of my place. There's a storm and sewer easement there. But the plan shows that they're gonna start cutting into our property in the back on that easement, which we are against. And we're directly behind them. And when we bought that, there is a paper we got from the lawyer that says these are not to be subdivided lots. And I think we sent a copy of that to you people. But now we get to, these people want to subdivide it, and from what we hear around the neighborhood, is all they're doing, they're going to subdivide it and then resell it because they have a place up on the top of the hill that they can't. Because this house that they was on there this is an ex-drug house, and I don't think it's been inspected anyway. So nobody wants to live in that house, and that's why they can't sell it. So they have to subdivide it in order to sell to pay for this. But other than that, we bought the house. We've been here for 28 years, and we bought it because of the lot. It's a nice big lot, and if somebody wanted, if everybody can subdivide it, we can, because we have a 10-foot easement there. That'd be our driveway, which we don't want nobody to have that. Everybody wants the big lots. That's what people are living there for. We have nice big gardens. The guy that had it behind the house, that owned the house when we moved in, he had a nice, lovely garden. The only trouble is he got caught growing dope, so.
Garden was too nice.
Yeah, he had marijuana, oh yeah. But then, but that's neither here nor there. But, so that's, everybody has the big gardens. We like it there. Big green lawns, flowers and everything. And like they say, it's a very friendly neighborhood. And you get more people in there. The kids, during the winter, they have to walk down the road. So if you're gonna start adding more people, the roads are not wide enough to carry that. Because it's just, you get snow up in there, and the roads are quite narrow, and there's no place for the kids to go. There's no sidewalks, but the kids and they can't ride their bikes. That's where they ride their bikes, up and down the road. But anybody traffic there anymore will ruin it. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Do you have any questions for this presenter? Okay, not at this time. Thank you. Is there others in the audience who would like to come forward and speak on this variance? I'll ask for a second time. Please come forward.
Joe Johnson, 5460 40th Avenue Northwest. I understand the concerns of the neighbors. I mean, it's hard to find a place in Salmon Arm that hasn't been impacted by change in the growing community, in our growing community. But that being said, if there were 6 meters there wouldn't be a public hearing. There would just be a subdivision taking place. But I understand that change is difficult, and I hope council supports this.
Thank you. Director of Development Services.
So, Your Worship, with a 10% parcel coverage, the footprint of an accessory building could be 2,787 square feet footprint, and that could be set back 1 meter from the south property line and from the east or west property line. So 3 feet with a 27, almost 2,800 square foot footprint and 6 meters in height.
Thank you. Councillor Lassen, did you want to follow up to that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'd love to follow that.
So, Council, I'll just remind you that we are still in the hearing, so if you have a question for staff related to the hearing, please ask. Otherwise, we'll close the hearing and then we'll talk. Okay, Councillor Lassen.
Oh, perfect. So 2,700 square foot footprint if there was no rezoning and they just wanted to build an accessory footprint? And that is a minimum 1 meter setback from the rear lot line and the side lot line? So it's like the biggest garden shed you can imagine? It's bigger than a Canadian Tire one.
Council, please hold together. It's 11:15 and we're still on
Yeah,
our business.
so what I'm trying to ask, your worship, is if this variance isn't granted and the applicants wanted to build a secondary building on their property to house an RV, a logging truck, or in this case maybe a skidder, they could do a 2,700 square foot footprint on that. That's correct, and 6 meters high, so 18 feet high. What is the difference between that with a 1 meter setback on the rear lot and the side lot compared to what a new house would be able to be built there, and what are the setbacks?
Your worship, I don't have the answer to that. I'm sorry.
The setbacks on R1 are how much?
For an accessory building?
No, for a new house, as proposed with the variance with the subdivision.
6 meters from the, if a house was to go on this new lot, if it is subdivided, it would be 6 meters from this lot line.
Yep.
1.5 meters from this lot line, 1.5 meters from this lot line, 1.5 meters from that lot line.
And if it was just an accessory building, it would just have to be 1 meter setback from the back, rear, and side?
Yeah, and actually, if you really want to get technical about the accessory building size, the combined area of both the house and the accessory building cannot exceed 45% of the parcel. So I can't do your calculation on that, I'm sorry.
That's fair. What I'm trying to outline, your worship, and thanks for the leniency on it, is that if this variance isn't granted and they wanted to build a shop on the back of their property, it would have essentially the same impact and potentially even worse impact on the neighborhood. And I just wanted to make sure that we were all clear on where the building could be and how big it could be. So thank you for that.
Okay, appreciate it. Did you have any other questions at this time, Councillor Lassen?
Thank you.
Councillor Canada, do you have a question?
Yeah, I guess for staff, what merit or would a document from the lawyer saying way back when this was developed that they couldn't be subdivided, does that have any merit or weight?
I'm not aware of any document on this title that prohibits subdivision.
So it has to be registered on title in order for it to be valid, not if it was an original buyer in this development, if they just had a piece of paper from the lawyer, or I wasn't quite sure about that.
Unless the owner or agent is aware of a document on title that says something like that, I am not.
Well, I'm just referring to the speaker that said that.
Mr. Johnson, can you clarify for us?
Yes, I'm not aware of any unregistered agreements that aren't registered in the land title office that would stand up. I did a title search. There is no covenant restricting subdivision. There is a building scheme registered against lot 10. It does restrict, the number of stories of, that house can be. It restricts it to 2 stories. That's the only restriction that is has anything to do with buildings.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. The hearing is still open, so yes, please name and address.
Cam Brown, I'm the owner of the property, 1230 52nd Avenue. Just to be clear, we are in fact living there, but it is a temporary situation. We are likely to move in several months forward, but I don't see that as relevant. I just want to point out the lot immediately to the east of us was created as a result of subdividing, I guess it's 11, the one immediately further to the east. That used to be a single lot and it was subdivided, so clearly that it is a eligible activity going on. There is a driveway on the subject, the property immediately to the east, so immediately adjacent to this panhandle, there's already a driveway accessing a parking at the back. So that exact property is almost very similar to what we're actually asking to do on this very property here.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Councillor Canada, did you press your button?
I have one more question.
Yes, please.
To Director.
Oh, sorry, press your button again. I made a mistake.
To Director of Development and Services. So if this property was, if we weren't looking at a variance, the applicant could subdivide this with approval from Development Services?
Director of Development Services?
If a sidewalk was already constructed along here, and if this was 6 meters in width, yes.
That's why the request for the variance. It's not 6 meters in width.
Yeah, I knew, I walked the property, so yes. Okay, thanks.
Okay. We're still in a hearing, so is there anyone else that would like to come forward and speak? Yes, you have an opportunity. Now's your chance.
My name's Charles again. If the property to the east of them had the proper width, they could subdivide it, and they did. This property to the west does not have that, so why do we discuss variances? If we wanna, if it would have had the correct distance across there, it would have been a done deal. But now we're here discussing what we think is a proper variance, or the width. I would only like to add this comment. In coming here and talking to Chris, my property does not have a right-of-way on it. The sewer line from my house and the drain water line go 1 foot over the property line to the west. It's 6.5 feet down. They can't come on my property because there's no right-of-way on there. So when you go down 6.5 feet, you got to taper the sides of the ditch up, and there isn't, they'd be on my property. So I'd just like to, one more time, say this shouldn't happen. The variance should not be granted.
I understand, thank you. Is there any other speakers who'd like to speak to this variance? I'll ask a second time. I'll ask a third and final time. Does anyone else like to come speak to this variance? Okay, I think everyone's had their input. I'll close this variance hearing. Could we have the motion up on the screen, please? I think, did we have a mover and seconder?
We did, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Any questions, council, for staff at this time? Okay, I just have one question. If the property was rezoned to R8, is the width of a driveway to a secondary suite that's detached, is it the same dimension of driveway necessary, or is it a different? I know that's a technical question.
I mean, I don't know the answer, but I think 4.5 meters in width is okay. In terms of our access policy 311, I do like to get comments from the fire department on these applications, and we will seek their comments on the R8 proposal.
Okay, I understand. Okay, thank you very much. Council, any comments on this variance request before we vote? Councillor Cannon.
Thank you, Your Worship. I know at Development and Planning, we moved this ahead to here. And I did say to the applicant, make sure that you get in touch with all of your neighbors, because I know for myself that weighs heavily on something like this. And I think what we're hearing from the neighbors, and when we look at the addresses of all these neighbors and the ones that presented, I think they make a very good point that this is a unique property here. And, I mean, you even look at this map and the configuration of the property and how it all lines up with the bigger lots. I think the neighbors have, you know, spoken on how they feel on this, and I won't be supporting this variance.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Wallace-Richmond.
Thanks, Your Worship. So it's important to understand that this is a variance, not a subdivision that we're approving. But without the variance, the subdivision can't go ahead. The property owner could also put a garage on the back of that property. And so either way, there's an opportunity for them to build something here. I would rather see it done to the highest and best level, even if that includes a small variance, 0.7 meters. So I am prepared to go ahead and move it forward.
Thank you. Any other speakers before we call the question? Seeing none? Oh, Councillor Eliason.
Yeah, I think my mic has an override button, and I don't know if anybody likes that part, but here we go. I will support the variance application. It's, in my mind, minor, and believe it or not, I think it offers more protection to the neighbors as far as setbacks than would a normal outbuilding on this location. And I think you get what you get, but we look at panhandle subdivisions a lot around here, and I think that the variance required. I mean, if the applicant really wanted to avoid the variance, and if it got turned down, it might cost them a little bit of money to move their roof line or move the corner of their house a smidge, and be able to go forward with it without a variance and just a variance for the sidewalk. And I don't want to do that because I don't think it's really necessary at this point. So I will support the variance at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lindgren.
Thank you. I also will support the variance. I understand the neighbors' concerns. They feel that they've bought into a lifestyle there, but after the last hearing where we talked extensively about infill and density and the housing crisis that we have, I think that this is a reasonable lot size. And yeah, I think the variance is minor to approve it.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Cannon, yes?
So, just so that I understand, if the variance gets approved, then the subdivision will come to us, and is that another approval that happens? Or is that approved through Development Services?
Director of Development Services.
Your Worship, if the variances are approved, the subdivision would be contemplated internally by staff for approval, not council, but a rezoning to R8 will come back to you.
Okay, and then I have one more question if I could.
Yes, please.
The other question is, the last fellow that presented again said about the easement and stuff. So that's something that staff will look at. If it's not a registered easement, how do we go about hooking into that?
Your Worship, if the concern is about storm drainage, part of the subdivision requirements is to have an on-site stormwater system, and we don't have that yet. We don't have a geotech report or anything, so that's all part of the subdivision review.
Okay.
So we don't have the information yet.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you for your questions, Councillor Cannon. Any other questions? Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Cannon opposed. Motion passes. Okay. You can, because it's, yeah, you can, because you have an open question for council at this time. Please come on down to the microphone.
Dean Chamberlain, 1251 50th.
Yeah.
So you've approved the variances, so now we will have a chance to come and speak against the subdivision?
So if the owner of the lot decides to leave the zoning at R1, then there will not be that opportunity. If the owner of the lot decides to rezone to R8, then there would be a rezoning hearing and you would have that opportunity.
So at an R1, they can't build a house back there then?
R1 he can, R1 he can build a house. If he wanted to rezone to R8, he would have to have a rezoning hearing.
So in order to build a house, if he's gonna build a house to sell it, it'd have to be an R8?
No, it could be R1. It's all, because the whole lot's R1 right now.
So what can we do to stop that subdivision then, if he subdivides it?
He may subdivide it now, if he wants to leave it R1.
We can't do anything to stop it then?
That's right. I just want to make sure the Director of Development Services, I've given the right direction there.
In theory, he can subdivide subject to everything written in the PLA.
All right, I know the technical part. But if the owners wanted to upgrade to R8, there would be a zoning hearing at that time. Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Did I clear up something I said and didn't finish?
You can come forward to the mic if you have a question,
Okay.
because this is question and answer period.
Okay, well, what I last stated and walked away from was, I don't think you're gonna have to change the diameter of the pipe from the manhole on the property involved to the manhole to the street. But if that diameter of that pipe should have to be increased, good luck, you can't get it in there. But I don't think that's the case.
Okay, thank you very much.
That's what I meant to say.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you, Charles, for clarifying that for us. Would someone like to make a motion to adjourn? Councillor Lindgren, Councillor Lavery, all those in favor?
11:31.
Thank you, all of you who hung in there and stayed, and thank you to staff.
Thank you guys.
And council, good job. That was a